Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, sponsored by New Road Capital Partners, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, which we also call the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals in business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, strategize, and market effectively in the retail value chain. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I'd like to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to our founding sponsor, New Road Capital Partners. New Road Capital Partners invests in proven and innovative technologies, products, and services that serve existing and unmet needs in the marketplace. New Road partners with growth-oriented companies in supply chain and logistics and innovative consumer companies. As experienced entrepreneurs and operators, the New Road team prides itself on the high level of collaboration it brings to each of its investments. New Road's team of investment professionals and operating partners have deep, relevant investing and operating experience, including significant experience leading large divisions of enterprise companies and building businesses from scale to concept to realization. To learn more, visit newroadcp.com. I also want to disclose that I'm an advisor to New Road. I would like to take this moment to recognize podcastvideos.com for being our provider of podcasts. Their mission is simple: to streamline the process of creating podcast videos. They're equipped with industry-leading equipment and streamlined processes, and their studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. I'm very pleased with the services they provide me. Now, without further ado, let's get started with today's episode. I have with me today Chris Sultemeier, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. He was over all of global supply chain logistics and transportation operations for Walmart. He was at Walmart for 28 years, and now he's on the boards of several high-tech logistics and supply chain management companies. And we're going to talk about that, but I'm really excited about this interview. You will learn so much from this. We start out talking about Walmart, which is quite remarkable. If you look at how much Walmart changed over the 28 years that Chris was there. But we're going to be talking about leadership, including things like team building, integrity. We're going to be talking about how you bring an entrepreneurial mindset into a large organization like Walmart, which is probably one of its core competencies that allows it to pivot quickly. We're going to be talking about, pickup, order online, pickup at store. You may or may not know much about it, but it's a very important change in business in the United States in this century. It will be a landmark event. We also talk about his selection of Symbotic for automation of distribution centers. I can't wait for you to hear about that. I asked him a pretty tough question about what emerging technologies he's most excited about, and he explained it. We only got through 3 of them, so I think we're going to do another episode on this because I'd like to hear more about that, and I think you will too. It's a really exciting podcast, but let me give you his formal introduction. So Chris has over 30 years of experience in logistics and supply chain. He worked at Walmart stores for 28 years, most recently serving as Executive Vice President of Logistics. In that role, he oversaw Walmart's global supply chain, logistics, and transportation operations. Chris serves on the board of directors for several companies, some of which include Nyshex, Platform Science, Lajoie. He's also an operating partner at New Road Capital Partners, which is a private equity firm that focuses on the retail value chain, which includes supply chain logistics, CPG, and retail technologies. But Chris began his career as a U.S. Army officer, serving for 5 years in roles of increasing responsibility. He's a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. He has a breadth of experience in logistics, supply chain, corporate leadership, and it allows him to give us valuable guidance and advice based on his experience. He's been involved with companies at the intersection of logistics, technology, and retail his whole life. I think you're really going to enjoy this if you're interested in business. Chris, you have nearly 30 years of experience leading supply chain and logistics at Walmart, one of the world's largest companies. And before I get into some questions, I just want to give people an idea. Most people have no idea the size of Walmart. It's hard to comprehend a little bit, but Walmart has 190 distribution centers, and that's hard to imagine. I mean, there are very few retailers with 190 stores, and Walmart has 190 distribution centers. And it serves stores, clubs, and direct delivery to customers.
And Matt, that's just in the U.S.
Yes.
That's not international.
That's a good point. So
it's another 130 international physical locations where there's a distribution center, a fulfillment center, a center point, some type of physical operation. So it just compounds when you add the international footprint.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, it's hard to believe, too, that in China, I've been following Walmart China since it opened. And I remember that first super center in Shenzhen, when they opened the door, everyone came in and it crushed the jewelry case, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But that was in the 90s. Now they've got a lot of stores and clubs, and for a long time, some of the biggest clubs in the world were in China. I don't know if that's still the case, but the other thing that surprised me was that 50% of Walmart's sales in China are e-commerce. I would have never expected that would happen. It's quite remarkable. Within Walmart US, and I don't know the answer internationally, Walmart's transportation fleet has 11,000 tractors, 80,000 trailers, and more than 13,000 drivers, which would make it an enormous trucking company in the United States. I don't know where it would rank, but it would be up there.
Typically, whenever we would pull out the transport topics or whatever list of largest private fleets, typically Walmart was the largest Class 8 private fleet. So you had the two big bottle distributor companies, the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi, that would be larger in terms of number of powered units. But if you get to Class 8 tractors, Walmart was typically the largest private fleet, and normally somewhere about number 6 or 7 in terms of largest fleets in the company, public or private.
That's amazing. And of course, I remember early on, I was fortunate enough to, when you all started getting into backhaul, I got to work on a project to figure out how to optimize the routes and stuff and timing. But I thought, well, this is a great idea. It makes sense. I had no idea it would grow to the level that it's at today.
One of the things that amazes people and I always was questioned when I was there, but if you've got 12 or 9 or 10,000 tractors, why do you have 70 or 80,000 trailers? So we were always challenged, but you just mentioned backhaul. And it's something that's real interesting, and what people don't realize about how that fleet operates is it's totally a drop and hook program. So you're dropping at a distribution center and taking a full load to a store and dropping at a store and picking up an empty at a store and going to a vendor and dropping the empty at a vendor and picking up a full load at the vendor and then driving that full load to the Walmart distribution center and dropping that full load and picking up another full load and taking it to the store. And it just goes constantly like that. And so there ends up being a lot of trailers to feed that network. But the exciting thing is a typical Walmart driver drives over 9 hours in their 10, 11-hour duty cycle. And so you get a lot of efficiency when you have all of those trailers.
There's so many things in logistics and supply chain that are counterintuitive to someone who's not familiar with it. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you pointed this out, because someone could easily think, well, that doesn't seem efficient. But it's the exact opposite. And I remember I've had people say this to me quite a bit over the years is, why does, a product go from, say, Cincinnati to, a distribution center somewhere and then back to a store near Cincinnati? That doesn't make any sense. But if they thought about the efficiencies you get by having full truckloads, they'd understand.
That's exactly right. I mean, every time you go up from a parcel to an LTL, LTL to a full truckload, or a partial load to a full load, you get an order of magnitude of a much more efficient, cost-effective load. So the more you can pool that together into a full truckload, the efficiencies are dramatic.
But if you notice this about logistics and supply chain, there's a lot of counterintuitive things like this that it's always a challenge to explain it to people. If you're in the business and you play with the numbers, it makes total sense. It's very intuitive. But the other thing is, each distribution center is more than 1 million square feet in the United States, and typically has over 700 personnel for unloading, shipping, et cetera, et cetera. But they ship about 200 trailers a day, which is also remarkable. It's hard to be efficient enough to drive that much volume from a distribution center. Another thing people wouldn't recognize if you hadn't seen other data, 200 a day is incredible.
It really is. And it's interesting because typically a Walmart distribution center is aligned to somewhere around 100 stores. Could be 100, could be 110, 115, but around 100 stores. Then if you start thinking about the math of that's 200 truckloads a day, then you start going, oh, that means 2 truckloads per store per day, which is correct. And so one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is Walmart delivering to a supercenter is so different than like a dollar store or a convenience store, because so often those situations are a truck multi-stop concept. But in Walmart, no, it's 2 or 3 trucks. There were some stores, Matt, that were receiving 6 and 7 trucks per day from a distribution center. And so it's just a very different business model than the traditional model of a truck making multiple stops. It's just very different.
Way more efficient.
Much more efficient.
People don't realize, too, that when you get that kind of efficiency, it's really a sustainability advantage that, a lot of people don't think that. They think, oh, this must be inefficient. No. It's way more efficient than any other kind of distribution system.
Back in 2005, Walmart launched into a big sustainability initiative.
I remember.
And you remember that. One of the challenges, and at that time, Lee Scott, former logistics leader, was leading the company at that time. And one of Lee's challenges of us, and at that time I was running Walmart Transportation, one of his challenges was, I want you to double the fleet efficiency. And so we're just, from a sustainability standpoint, what does double fleet efficiency mean? Well, for us, the way we decided to define it is cases shipped, gallons burned. So how many cases do you ship? How many gallons? Because we wanted, quote, a work type metric. Mm-hmm. We wanted something that was volume based. And so that's what we launched on, is how do we double the number of cases we ship based on the gallons that we're burning from an environmental standpoint. And it literally took us 10 years from 05 to 15. But by 2015, we had doubled the number of cases we were shipping per gallon burned. And the cool thing was we had the Environmental Defense Fund, EDF, monitoring us and checking the numbers and being a partner with us in evaluating all of our tactics. But the tactics, Matt, were just what you talked about. How do you get more on the trailer? How do you take water out of product? So if you remember the concentrated laundry detergents,
I remember it well.
All of those things were all about how do you ship more, How do you reduce the footprint of what goes on the trailer? How do you fill the trailer? How do you optimize deliveries? How do you put all that together? And how do you talked about it earlier, how do you run more efficient backhauls? Because all of that was burning gallons. Anytime you're running empty, you're burning. And so all of those things went into that, but the net of it was we doubled the fleet efficiency. And then in 15, when they were doing the Sam M. Walton Award for entrepreneurship and everything, that was one of the things that was recognized because the sustainability team received that award.
Wow. And I remember when they did the kickoff of this sustainability initiative in Beijing in 2006.
That's right.
It was a big deal. And I felt very fortunate to be there. And
I was going to say, you were over there at that time.
I was. But just listening to all the stories and the vision, and to see that most of it's come to fruition, including the cases delivered, gallons burned. That's really a remarkable story. But it really is about logistics efficiency.
It is.
I mean, that's really what logistics and supply chain is about.
It is. And really, you said it earlier, an efficient logistics organization perfectly aligns with sustainability because you're doing more with less. And so it's just a marriage. And then when you get what you have at Walmart, where you have dramatic scale, then you can drive so much efficiency.
Well, a long time ago when Walmart came up with the idea, Sam Walton, of, rather than, because Walmart, Kmart, and Target all started in 1962. And Kmart was rolling out stores in, quote, good markets. And Walmart was sticking to the idea of let's stay close to the distribution center. And, I remember I started following Walmart really closely, I guess, in about 1989 when I was in graduate school at Penn State. I don't know what caught my attention about it, but one of the things that, this notion of, if your store's close to the DC, you have a shorter lead time, so you're less likely to stock out of the store. But you can have full truckloads of homogeneous products going into the DC and full truckloads of heterogeneous products going out of the DC. And so you get this amazing efficiency, not only in terms of transportation, but also in terms of inventory management.
Yeah, service.
And, but sticking to that discipline, I would think would be hard, because I remember when I first got involved in China, I remember the suppliers had a hard time buying into this notion, because most of the world does direct store delivery, which is terribly inefficient. Again, intuitively, it seems like, that would be more efficient. But no, I remember going to Carrefour in Shanghai. One of my neighbors was an executive in Carrefour, and he gave me a tour. There must have been 200 vendors at the back dock. And you go to the Walmart DC, and there's just a few trucks, and you see, this efficiency is just dramatic. But it was very hard to, I think, teach people in other countries what these concepts mean, and they should implement them.
It's funny. I used to have a picture, and I don't think I still have it. But it was, you talked about the supercenters, but also the Sam's Club that was there in Shenzhen. And for years, that was the highest volume Sam's Club also. But I used to have a picture because in the early days, the Sam's Club office was above that first Sam's Club there. And anyway, they had a picture of one of the windows, and it was the back of the Sam's Club, early days, and it just showed literally hundreds of vehicles trying to get to the back dock of that Sam's Club to deliver. And you just saw that, and it was like a massive funnel with all of these pickup trucks and, three-wheelers and everything else trying to get to the back of that club to deliver their stuff. And you saw that, and you just thought, how unbelievably inefficient that was. And then over time, obviously, that all changed. But initially, it was a hard slog.
I can't imagine. I've heard all kinds of stories about back then you had to, in the early days of Walmart and Sam's Club in China, you had to work with the government to move your product. They made a smart move in deregulating that and allowing the private sector. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, China made a brilliant move there, just like we did when we had the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 and deregulated transportation. If they wouldn't have done that, they wouldn't be near where they are today.
That's exactly right. And I wasn't directly involved. I was indirectly involved in creating a cold chain, a supply chain, cold chain in China. And the work, in fact, the gentleman now that's the CEO of the U.S. business, John Furner, at that time, John was the head merchant for Walmart China. And John was working with a lady we had named Leslie over there. And John and Leslie were working the whole supply chain deal to establish a cold chain supply chain, because that really did not exist in China. And it took them about 2 or 3 years, but they really stood up perishable distribution centers and suppliers all shipping into perishable distribution centers, and then perishable deliveries to our stores and clubs. But it was groundbreaking for that to happen in China.
So amazing.
Yeah.
It was fun to watch China emerge. I know China's got a lot of challenges right now, but they seem to be pretty adaptable. They're very entrepreneurial people, even though they're operating in a communist, so-called socialist system. The people there are very entrepreneurial. Well, okay, I want to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Again, with your experience at Walmart, really leading the largest private logistics supply chain network in the world, And of course, I don't know exactly where you started, but I know early on you were in replenishment at Walmart. You were over replenishment at Walmart. When I met you, what year would that have been?
That would have been probably around 93 or 94. So that's when you and the professors came to teach us.
Yes. Yeah, that was such a fun time.
Friday afternoons.
It was summertime, wasn't it?
It was.
You had some dedicated employees.
I did.
But given your experience, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned in your leadership roles? And you've had many in your life.
Yeah, I think, Matt, I would go all the way back even to college and the military, because the learnings from there moved right into practice wherever I was, Walmart or whatever jobs at Walmart or Sam's Club or wherever I was at. And really, I think number one is the concept of servant leadership. I mean, and I know it's cliche, and I know people talk about servant leadership all the time, but you are only as good as the team you're leading. And your role as a leader is to serve them, to take away the barriers and the obstacles, and to empower them so that that team can be successful. There's probably nothing in my career that was more enjoyable than seeing a team accomplish more than they ever thought they could. And that, to me, was probably the highlights of my career, is having that opportunity to lead that team and them do things that they never thought they could, and to see that excitement, that sense of accomplishment, and just how uplifting that was to those people. So I think that would be, for me, number one, and then that whole concept of team, and that we're all in this together. I think the only other thing I would mention is I would just challenge everyone to never compromise your character. Stand firm on what your values are, and never compromise your character. I look back over my time in the military and my time at Walmart and everything else, and probably the 2 or 3 times I can think about that I looked the other way when I should have said something, those are probably the things that were still probably most disappointing to me today, that I didn't take a stronger stand. And so often I did, but sometimes I didn't. And so that would be the only other challenge I would have of folks, is to never compromise your character.
So this servant leadership team and the concept of you're only as good as the team you're leading, and then your pleasure in seeing your team accomplish more than they thought they could. I would imagine that not only helped the team succeed, it probably made people want to be on your team.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of the most exciting things, because once the team starts, it's just like sports. Once the team starts winning and the morale starts coming and the excitement starts coming, then people want to jump on that team. The other exciting thing is other groups see what's happening and they start wanting the team members. They start wanting to recruit your team members and pull. And that's wonderful too, because then those teammates get to go do things in other areas and take on bigger responsibility. So it's just a multiplying type effect. Others want to join. Others are getting tapped on the shoulders to do other things. And it creates a really positive dynamic.
This is so interesting. Anyone who's ever led teams knows this can happen. It can also go the other way. But I do think people who take pleasure in seeing others succeed, I think that there's some people can take more pleasure in that than others for some reason. I've noticed this. There's a term for it, and I can't remember it now. But if you can, it really helps you lead the team, because people can tell when you truly celebrate their success or if you're just saying it. Because sometimes team leaders fear team members in their team that are too talented or too successful, thinking that it might make them look bad. I'm sure you've seen things like that.
Absolutely. But it kind of goes back, if you remember years ago, and so obviously Walmart's known for the Saturday meetings and having the Saturday meetings and bringing speakers in. And I remember one time David Glass brought in Lou Holtz when Lou Holtz was the coach at the University of Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
And David started asking Lou Holtz, because at that time Lou Holtz was building the program at the University of Arkansas. And David Glass asked Lou Holtz, what's the secret? And Lou Holtz said, well, the secret is you got to get great players. And David said, well, how do you get great players? And Lou said, number one, the players have to know you care. Number one. He said, everything else comes from that. If the players know you care about them, not the team, but about them personally, and you care about their success, you care about them as individuals, he said, then everything springs from that. And it was just really powerful for me sitting there, because it just confirmed everything I had seen in the military, I had seen in Ranger School, I had seen in all these different things that I had done. If people know that you care, it is amazing what they will do and the lengths they will go to for the team if they know that the leader cares about them personally.
There's some research in academic journals, peer-reviewed research, that shows that there's 3 key variables to building trust in an organization for a leader. One of them is this notion that people believe you have their best interest in mind. So that's one of the 3. The other 2 include that the leader's competent, and the third one is that they have integrity, that is, that they'll do what they say they will do. And that gets to your third point, never compromise your integrity. If you're not compromising your integrity, then you're following through on what you're saying, and that also builds trust. So really everything you're saying, when you were explaining this to me, I started thinking trust. You're building trust in your teams. But not just trust, also excitement. I mean, everyone wants to be on a winning team.
Absolutely.
It's fun.
Everybody wants to win. I think I don't care who it is, they've got a little bit of a competitive streak. Some people have a bigger competitive streak, but everyone wants to be on that winning team. You want to win. You talked about trust. I'm going to go back to that for just a minute. You talk about trust. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. And you have to have a relationship, and the only way to have that relationship with your people is you have to have trust. And so all of those things that you can do to build that trust, that you're looking out for their well-being, is so critical to have that relationship so that you have trust and you can get things done as an organization.
Well, I really love this, and it makes me wonder, Walmart throughout history. Again, I started following Walmart closely in about '89 when I was at Penn State, and I would use Walmart sometimes in my classes as examples, and my professors knew almost nothing at that time. Kmart was bigger than Walmart.
That's right.
But I was reading about Walmart sharing sales data with P&G and then other teams, and then the teams were moving to town. All this always fascinated me. And so when I had the opportunity to interview here, I asked if they would set up an appointment for me to meet for lunch with the EVP of Logistics for Walmart, and they did.
Who was it at that time?
Lee Scott.
Yeah.
And Lee immediately, he said, look, if you come here, I'll get you involved in some projects. I'll introduce you to people. I'll hire your students, these kind of things. And he followed through on it. And again, this was a long time ago. But then he got me and a friend of mine who was an industrial engineering professor involved in a really cool optimization project in logistics. And then he went to merchandising, I think, and then they hired Mike Duke. And so I started working with Mike Duke, and they had a guy named Robert Bruce at the time that was heading up supply chain. And I got to work on the early version of CPFR with him and some other people. But here's my point. I remember when we were talking about CPFR, back then we called it CFAR, continuous forecasting and replenishment, CFAR. We eventually put the P in there, but the idea was that suppliers have knowledge that the retailer doesn't have and vice versa. If you combine these, you'll be able to get a better solution. That's a very theoretical concept. And I think it takes a special company to take a abstract, esoteric idea like that and to try to bring it into reality, which they did. But the other thing I've noticed over the years is Walmart can pivot. Now, a lot of times people say, oh, Walmart doesn't change easily. They're too huge, right? Well, they focus on their priorities. So your priority may not be their focus, and that's why you're not seeing movement. But if it is their focus, I remember, I can't remember who was saying it. May have been John Ferner, but they were saying, look, we're going to merge our .com, our e-commerce app and our store app into one app, and we're going to also merge our merchandising for e-commerce and brick and mortar into one person, for each category and whatever. Anyway, I thought this will take years. It didn't. They actually executed it more quickly. So many suppliers still haven't. Many suppliers are still operating separately. They're not operating omni-channel kind of way. But I wonder this idea of servant leadership, and I know it's part of, if you look at the 10 rules for building a business by Sam Walton, which we have in the College of Business at the university, on the floor that I'm on, his 10 rules for building a business. Servant leadership really comes through in those. I don't think it says servant leadership in it, but that's what I hear. And I wonder if that is part of the reason they're able to pivot so quickly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason. I think there's still, in a lot of people, I'll go back. I'll digress for a little bit. Go back to the days when Sam was running the company. Because when I first started, Sam was running the company.
Right.
We were doing enormous numbers of tests. So there was a dot drugstore. There was a farm store. We had all of these different formats of stores that were being tested and tried, and everything was going on. The Supercenter started as a hypermarket, and that was too big. And then it morphed into this and morphed into that. And finally, they arrived upon the Supercenter. Sam's Club was a test. They tried the Sam's Club test, and then they did the neighborhood market test. So there's always been this constant test and try and test and try. I'll give you another example. Back in 2016, which was my last full year at the company, they let everyone know that we were going to try this whole concept of pickup at the store.
Huh.
Now, at that time, I was the EVP of Logistics. So I was in that room when we talked about doing pickup at the store. And this whole concept of ordering online and then a customer coming to the store and picking up their stuff, but a separate order process online and then a physical come to the store to pick up. I thought that was the craziest idea. I thought there is no way a customer is going to take the time to order and then still drive to the store and pick up their stuff. They're either going to want it delivered, or if they're going to come to the store, they're going to come shop. One of the two. But this order and pickup, that's a failing proposition. Well, I was about as wrong as I could have been, because in 16 it started, and 17 it picked up, 18 it got going, 19 it became very large, and then suddenly COVID hit in 20. And suddenly that's the way the consumer wanted to interact. And it was the funniest thing. Back in 19, I was at a Mother's Day get-together, and I had several nieces that were young moms sitting at the table at a Mother's Day function. And two of the nieces looked at me back in 19, and they said, the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, other than having my child, is when Walmart pickup. And I'm looking at these young moms thinking, you got to be kidding me. Why is that one of the greatest things? And they said, you have no idea. To get your kid out, to load your child in a car and go shop a store is the most terrible experience. But if I can sit there at home and do my ordering and then just while I'm running my errand, stop by the store and pick up, that for me is the definition of convenience. And, oh, by the way, I don't want to have to be home for a 3-hour block of time in case a delivery might happen. I would rather pick up while I'm already out running errands. That's more convenient to me than waiting for it to be delivered. But to hear these young moms say that, Matt, it was just so eye-opening for me. But I think it goes back to those are examples of test and try and test and try that Walmart continues to do today. And so I think that concept of it is a huge company, but there's that still entrepreneurial side of the company where they're tweaking and testing and trying things, the things they've done in supply chain with automation, the things they're doing in the backs of stores with automation. There's all of these things that they have going all the time. And I give a lot of credit to the leadership, because I think between, the people like Mike Duke and Lee Scott you talked about, and Doug McMillan and John Furter, there's this, let's try it.
That is so interesting. Entrepreneurship works everywhere, whether you're big or small. It's the key. It's an experimental approach to business, really. But I do love the story of pickup. Originally it was called grocery pickup, and it evolved. But then, I remember when COVID happened and people were starting to use it a lot. And I thought, this is going to really give Walmart an advantage, because they're going to have to figure out how to do this in high volumes, which will make them more efficient. To that end, I'd like to shift gears here a minute.
Sure.
Although I love this topic.
Sure.
When you were at Walmart, you signed a contract with Symbotic. And, it was quite a few years ago, but it was so important, probably more important than you could have realized at the time, I would guess. Would you mind talking about that?
Absolutely. It was interesting. So I'll give Rollin a lot of credit also, because Rollin Ford was a real partner with me. I had logistics at the time. Rollin was kind of in a role, kind of like the chief administrative officer of the company, but he had a logistics responsibility as well as technology. So if you remember, Karen Ann Terrell reported up to Rollin. I reported to Rollin. We were all kind of combined underneath him. But we knew from the standpoint of lots of things were going on in automation. We were looking at things at that time or even earlier, like what Amazon had done with Kiva and different things like that. But trying to look really at what's next, what really was coming next. And we got connected with some of the work that was going on with a new company called Symbotic, and was very impressed with it from the standpoint of goods to person, a shuttle system, a deep matrix for storage and things like that. And so it was interesting. So we got connected with them, evaluated them, went to their operation up in Albany, New York, a number of times where they had it fully deployed, and reviewed it. And the gentleman at that time that was really ran CNS Wholesale, owned CNS Wholesale, also owned Symbotic, Rick Cohen. And so it was Rick's company, and it was Rick's kind of brainchild, because he saw what was needed from a CNS standpoint in that business, and he knew that automation was the way to go. So we decided to quote, take the plunge and commit to a very long-term, very strategic partnership with Symbotic. And it took a lot of years from the standpoint of being able to integrate, but it was so exciting. You know, I'm long since retired from the company, but it's so exciting to see Walmart make the announcement last year, back in 22, that they were rolling out, and that they were rolling out that Symbotic technology. The first Walmart distribution center that we were putting it in when I was leaving the company was Brooksville, Florida. And since then, that technology is rolled out to other Walmart distribution centers, and it's just really exciting to see the success that they're having with it. And Matt, the other thing is it's also a big benefit to the stores, because the exciting thing is now goods are actually going to the stores, and they're arriving in a fashion on a pallet that aligns to the modular layout of that store. So from the standpoint of put away and things like that, it just adds a great level of efficiency for store operations, as well as adding those levels of efficiency to the distribution center operations.
When you said modular, you mean shelf layout?
Correct.
And so the automation allows for this to be optimized as well. So you, just like we talked about efficiency earlier and supply chain, you know, especially from a DC supplier, DC store perspective, this takes it to another level, and it shows how efficiency and optimization at the DC can actually affect store efficiency. And it's another one of those things that isn't necessarily obvious to people, but if you ever work in a retail store, you could figure that out pretty quickly. And I'm sure that I would think that would even make the quality of the work better.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's interesting is little things like heavy on light, you know, putting heavy products on light products. All of that is built into the equations on how the automation stacks the pallet, how the pallets are sequenced. So you're constantly looking at the store planogram, the store layout, the product density, and how to properly stack a load, but then also how to line it up with that aisle for the store. So you talked about that earlier. I tell you what, it's amazing the things that can take place in a distribution center, a fulfillment center, to make lives easier or harder on store associates. And so this is one of those that really helps streamline things all the way through the supply chain, going right from the DC, quote, shelf to the store shelf.
What a great story. Now, there's a lot of automation providers out there. And do you think that Symbotic had a competitive advantage because of the owner's experience and understanding this grocery and retail situation?
I think it did. I think two things. I think it was his knowledge of physical distribution center type operations to supply retail. That was one. But it was also his personal passion and drive and commitment that this was going to be successful. And so I think him being personally involved as the, quote, owner, and him being committed, I think the other thing that also was key for Walmart's success in this endeavor was Walmart made a huge commitment also. So it was a little bit, Matt, not a burn the ships, but it was a little bit of a, we're all in to making this work. We are committed to making this work. Symbotic is committed to making this work. We know it's going to be hard. It's going to take a number of years to get it all right and to get all of the technology working correctly and to gain the efficiencies before it's ready to roll out. But we're both totally committed. And so the interesting thing from Symbotic, it became such a large relationship that you had Doug McMillan personally involved in the relationship, along with Rick Cohen personally involved in the relationship. And so when you had the two leaders both committed to the success of the endeavor, then the entire organizations aligned to that mission, and then you've got such an opportunity for success.
That is another great story because you could have tried to do it internally.
And there's a lot of things we did try to do internally, and some were successful. Many weren't successful because, as you know, when an organization is trying to function internally, there's limited resources, there's prioritization, there's different constituents that have a different view of prioritization. And so lots of times it becomes very difficult for things to really rise to the top and to get the true lens on them, the spotlight on them so that they can be successful. Now, when you had this incubating and working, I think, on the outside somewhat, and working on the outside, but resources coming in from the outside, plus resources from Walmart, I just think that's one of the reasons. And then you also had people that were committed in the organization to it being successful. One example is David Gugina. And David Gugina now is running the supply chain group at Walmart. And David was leading that automation area at the time. And David and that team just did a fantastic job of shepherding that through the process to success.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
You know, I've met with him a few times, and I've noticed he's a very good communicator, clearly a strategic thinker. Well, I want to shift gears a bit.
Sure.
Again, there's just so many great things we could talk about here. But you now sit on the boards of several logistics and transportation tech companies. One, I would like to know, what are some emerging technologies that you're most excited about in logistics?
Yeah, let me talk about some of the companies that we're involved in.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I'll be able to then relay that to some of those emerging technologies that you asked about. So I'll start with Logua, just for example. So Logua is a WMS system. And a lot of people here, it's a WMS, it's a warehouse management system. What's interesting about that? Well, I go back to when we at Walmart opened the 2x2 network. And at Walmart, we had a challenge back in 2013 that we wanted to establish a 2-day ground network that could manage or handle 1 million SKUs and deliver 2-day ground to anywhere in the United States. We didn't have a backbone to do that. And so our challenge was to stand up 10 million square foot buildings, 5 campuses with a sortable, non-sortable building throughout the United States. And the challenge was to do that between 13 and Christmas of 15. 10 buildings stood up, new automation, new warehouse management system, new everything. And I remember at the time we were sitting and it was actually a board meeting, and Greg Penner, who's the Walmart chairman, looked at me and said, "Is this going to work?" And I just remember looking at him saying, "Trust me, Greg, it will work." But we launched into the project. The most difficult thing for us to do was to get the new WMS working, the new e-commerce B2C WMS operational. And so we were working with, at this time, for one of these projects, it was a company called SSI Schaefer. Great company, doing good work for us, but we struggled. We finally got the buildings up and operational, got the WMS working, everything worked, and by Christmas of 15, all the buildings were up and going. So we were successful.
Wow.
But the incredible long pole was that WMS, and that WMS interacting with all the automation. Now I'll fast forward to LodgeUp. So one of the things that I was so enraptured with when we first started evaluating LodgeUp, here you had a B2C e-commerce WMS system that could be started and up and operational and fully functional in 4 weeks. 4 weeks. And they were doing it successfully. And for me, that was just such a mind unbelievable look at something. Not mind blowing, but I couldn't imagine. I just could go back to my experience about how difficult it was to get these WMSs operational. And then to see this company going out and doing it in 4 weeks, standing up a company, in 4 weeks, standing up another company, and standing up another company. And so anyway, the bottom line was, from a New Road standpoint, is we end up investing. It was a company that was actually born in Turkey. And the Erhan, who started the company, is Turkish and came to the United States and started up the business here in the Chicago market and everything else. But he had a rich background in the space. But the amazing thing to me is what you can do with technologies these days, but the ability, the speed to onboard a customer in 4 weeks with the WMS was just amazing to me. And so those are the type things. So I would tell you that ability to integrate, speed, those are some of those things when I look at the logistics world out there and I see that and I'm just, wow. Another one that stands out for me is the platform business. And so for me, I can remember another Walmart story, Matt, and I'm going to kill you with Walmart stories. But another Walmart story, I remember we used a company for our truck telematics. We used a company called Omnitrax. And Omnitrax was who did our operating system, our telematics in our trucks. And I can remember, and I think this was 2012 or 2013, but the Omnitrax people coming into my office and saying, you need to upgrade all the hardware in your trucks. And I'm thinking, okay. And he said, this doesn't work and this isn't going to work and we're going to have a new version of software. There's not enough memory and there's not enough this and that, so you need to upgrade them all. And I'm like, okay. And he said, and the new version of hardware you're going to need to have for each one of your trucks is going to be about $8,000 a truck. And I remember sitting there looking at him and doing the math in my head and thinking, we've got 9,000 trucks, $8,000 a truck, $72 million you're just walking in here, you're wanting me to spend. Unbudgeted, unplanned, and it needs to happen like in the next 6 months. And I just remember looking at him being so frustrated. And at that time, I had, I think, an iPhone 2 or I had an iPhone 3. And I laid the iPhone on my desk and I said, are you kidding me? I need something that functions like this iPhone. I need something that's got apps where we can do things with it, where it's about the software, it's not about the hardware. And, he just dismissed me. And then suddenly, fast forward 2017, I get introduced to this guy named Jack Kennedy and what he's done with this company that's called Platform Science. And oh, by the way, it's an operating system. The hardware is secondary. And oh, you can have all these applications on it. And all these applications communicate through the operating system. And suddenly it's like my iPhone. And instantly I just said, that's it. That is what the trucking industry has to have, because I want to be able to build apps myself. I want to buy Matt's apps. I want to buy, John Smith's apps. I want to put, because there's all these incredible developers out there. I want them developing new, innovative, creative solutions, and I want them to go on this platform and me be able to use it all. That's what platform science is, and that's what Jack Kennedy and the team developed. And now it's the base system for many of the OEMs. It's out there in the biggest trucking fleets in the country, including Walmart's trucking fleet and everything else. And so it's just exploded onto the market. But that platform concept and everything being able to connect and everything being able to talk, those are the kind of things the logistics industry needs because it's so far behind. And one of the reasons it's so far behind is it's a capital-intensive industry. Mm-hmm. It's a narrow margin, capital-intensive business. There's not a lot of money left to go do other things. And so it's fallen behind. And so as people can develop these things and bring these things on, then you've got the opportunity to use those. That's where another one came about. So in 2015, I was at a conference in Southern California. And I was sitting there at the conference, and it was some kind of an innovation conference that I was invited to. And I remember we had just got through touring Flextronics, and they make all the wearable technology and everything else. We had toured their plant, and it was interesting, amazing, and you're just, wow, all of these ideas are swirling around. And then we all went into a room, and they had a few people come up and give some pitches, some new entrepreneurs and what they were doing. And this one young guy, South African guy, tall, good-looking guy, gets up and starts talking about what he wanted to do in the ocean shipping industry and how he wants to have these secure contracts and take away where, you have all this excess capacity that's unused in the industry because shippers overbook to protect service and carriers oversell to protect their ships, and the two don't meet, and it's just a mess. And it's just one of the huge areas of inefficiency in the ocean shipping business. And this guy, Gordon Downs, came out and he said, well, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to create all this stuff. So you had these agreed upon shared two-way contracts with penalties and everything else. And I remember sitting there listening to it, Matt, and thinking about me from a Walmart perspective and all the TEUs we ship every year, and thinking about the big ocean carriers, the Maersk and the CMAs and all those people, and thinking about trying to get us all to align and to agree on something. I grabbed Gordon afterwards and I said, Gordon, that's a great idea, but good luck. There is no way you're going to get these people to all align on this stuff. And he just kind of listened to me and nodded his head, and that was the end of the conversation. Fast forward, it's 2018, 2019, and suddenly I'm with New Road now, and we're looking at investment opportunities, and this guy shows up. And he's got this company called NYSHEX, New York Shipping Exchange. And they've got, in 2017, aligned with the Federal Maritime Carrier Association, and the FMC, aligned with what NYSHEX is doing and is supportive of it and everything. And I'm just looking at this thing thinking, oh my gosh, this guy who had this idea, this concept back in 2015, he's brought this to fruition. He's actually got a company, and they're actually doing this. They're actually have created these ocean contracts, and they're actually aligning shippers and carriers to take inefficiency out of the ocean shipping business. And so, it's just another great opportunity to see something that was a problem and to see a young entrepreneur get behind it and help solve that problem.
Wow, what a great answer.
So sorry, that was probably more than you wanted.
No, that's perfect, because I asked you about new technologies, and Lagua is clearly one in warehousing. Order fulfillment too.
That's right.
And then platform science and trucking, and then NYSHEX and ocean shipping. So you're covering new technologies and a good chunk of all of logistics there.
It is, but it's so interesting to see this thing from end to end, and to see what these different companies are doing all the way through that space. And Matt, the more you look at it, the more opportunity you actually see in the space. There's more. And then I can't yet, I was walking this morning early. I like to get out and hit the trail system. And I was listening to a podcast this morning on AI. And so I'm walking, listening to this podcast. And it's one of the guys that's one of the early employees at ChatGPT and the OpenAI and everything else. He actually came from Palantir, and now he's at this other organization. Now I'm listening to this podcast, and you just start thinking about how is AI going to take a lot of the unstructured data, bring that data in, and simplify, make a lot of the tasks today so much more efficient. And there's so many ways I think that that's going to affect our industry.
I think you're right. I'll tell you, this morning I read a really interesting article. They studied the Fortune 500 companies. 26% of them are doing nothing with generative AI. Nothing. I think there's an opportunity there.
Huge opportunity. Huge opportunity.
Well, this has been so fun, Chris. Again, congratulations on your amazing career and for being such a great individual, and for taking time to visit with me today. I really appreciate it.
Matt, I appreciate you. I go all the way back to whether it was 95 or 96, whenever it was, when I realized that the replenishment team I had at Sam's needed a lot more formal education, and connected with you and connected with a couple of the professors for the University of Arkansas in the supply chain department. And you guys came to Northwest Arkansas, came from Fayetteville up to Bentonville, and literally every Friday afternoon taught my team. And that really started the relationship for you and I together. But I just really appreciate how that relationship has grown over the years.
If you're finding value in this podcast, we greatly appreciate your support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Additionally, following us on Apple and Spotify and leaving up to a 5-star review would be immensely helpful. We welcome any feedback or questions related to the podcast, as well as suggestions for further topics and guests. You can leave your comments on our YouTube channel, and rest assured that I will read each and every one of them. Please also take a moment to check out our podcast sponsors, as they play a critical role in keeping this podcast running. For more information on specific topics, timestamps, or links to articles mentioned during the podcast, head over to mattwallerpodcast.com.